So when I went to Springfield, as you read in the blog, and I testified in front of the committee about pharmacist contraceptive prescribing, I noticed that every seat had this skinny black microphone with a small button on the bottom. And when you're ready to speak, you push that button and it turns green and everyone is looking at you and it's go time.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe, Episode 5, Superheroic, with your host, DB.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe. You are here because you are curious to learn and engage in the profession of pharmacy and its potential advancements. So our goal is to help socially educate and engage the world about #pharmacy by introducing you to ideas, people, and stories to help you maximize your engagement and understanding. Today's guest is an incredibly talented thought leader hailing from Boston, Massachusetts. After graduating from the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and finishing a primary care residency at Midwestern University, she took on a career in academia. Teaching and inspiring students about topics in women's health and practicing in the ambulatory care setting have been passion areas where she has made a major impact. Her belief in advancing pharmacy practice has led her to publish on topics such as pharmacist contraceptive prescribing, building ambulatory care sites, and gender-related differences in pharmacy curricula. She has held various leadership positions and currently serves as the Vice Chair of Clinical Services at Midwestern University, Chicago. She's focused on leadership topics with her students to help them prepare for their careers and has upcoming content that she's termed 21st Century PharmD. When asked about overcoming challenges, she talked about wrestling her little brother and how this taught her how to stand up for herself. Not only is she a pharmacist, she's also a mother of 2 children and 1 dog, an ice hockey player, and a marathon runner. Her blog, Superheroic, a blog for moms with a pharmacy twist, has been a hit on the Pharmacist Moms Group webpage. For the past 9 years, she has worked part-time and decided to dedicate efforts to spending time with and raising her family. She's an optimist, a problem solver, a pharmacist, a mom, and a leader. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Brooke Griffin to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. I'm super excited to be here, and I love everything that you've created with this podcast, and I just can't wait to dive into everything pharmacy, everything mom, everything leadership, and how that all ties in together.
Brooke, it's great to have you on the show and really appreciate you joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So what I try to do with the podcast is, kind of in the beginning, I want to get to know you a little bit. But really, I think one of the most important things and one of the things that really stuck out to me as I was, doing some research on the work that you're doing was the Pharmacist Moms Group and the blog that you have. So can you just kind of tell us about, what that is, how you got started in it, and really what led you to start blogging?
Sure. So one day on Facebook, I received an invitation to join a Pharmacist Moms Facebook group. And I thought, well, I'm a pharmacist and I'm a mom. And then I saw a colleague who I used to work with, Susie Solomon, started the group. So I knew her. So I said, okay, sure, I'll join. And Dave, I hope you talk to Susie in the future because I don't want to steal any of her thunder. But I joined this group when it had less than 100 members. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And now it has over 25,000 members. And this response just speaks to how great the need was and how it filled the gap of support for so many. So she launched, obviously, the Facebook group and then a website, and she put a call out for bloggers. And I had never written a blog before, but I like to write, and I'm passionate about both pharmacy and motherhood and trying to make both live in harmony. So I had a call with Susie and talked to her about my idea to write a post once a month and interview and highlight pharmacist moms who could offer all of us some advice. So I started in January, and it's been a great experience for me.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It just goes to kind of show where you find an area of interest or kind of an area of passion. And for you, obviously, pharmacy's your career, but really that kind of mom piece. And I think a lot of the listeners or maybe people out there who are either moms or maybe future moms or parents just in general. I think that's really cool that you've taken kind of two of your different passions and you've blended them into the blog. And one thing that I want to ask you about, because I saw in your latest blog post, you talk about advocacy and you kind of tell this story about, going to Capitol Hill in Illinois and advocating for this bill about pharmacists, prescribing of contraceptives. So if you think about that from a pharmacist and a mom perspective, what are the similarities that you notice, or what, can you kind of talk about the similarities from an advocacy perspective of being a mom and a pharmacist?
Sure. Well, it's funny because I tell students all the time, and you probably do too, as pharmacists, we are sometimes the patient's biggest advocate. So unbeknownst to many, we are strengthening our advocacy muscle every day. Every phone call you make to the patient's insurance or SNF, or asking a patient's family member to come in and pick up their meds, or even talking to their primary physician or specialist about your treatment plan, that's all advocacy. And of course, you may think that's just part of our job. Well, as moms, we advocate for our kids all the time. We talk to the school about why they need PT and OT. We research and ask and set up tutoring if the kid needs it. We make sure they have what they need to succeed. And when one little thing needs adjusting, we're on it, and we do what we can to fix it. But we don't always have that same skill when it comes to ourselves. It's incredibly hard to ask for help, and this got worse after having children. Even when you feel like you're drowning in everything, we wait and we wait and we wait for life to explode, and then we try and pick up the pieces. So when I went to Springfield, as you read in the blog, and I testified in front of the committee about pharmacist contraceptive prescribing, I noticed that every seat had this skinny black microphone with a small button on the bottom. And when you're ready to speak, you push that button, and it turns green, and everyone is looking at you, and it's go time. And with my colleagues, we spoke about pharmacist ability, patient access, and the importance of having females in control of their own contraception. These are not easy subjects at all. And when I was driving home to Chicago, I couldn't help but think about how, as moms, we're not using our microphones enough. What do we need to be successful as pharmacist moms, whether it's needs at home, like time for self-care, or needs at work, like a different work arrangement or a workload adjustment, or even just a place to pump? We don't tend to ask for these things. And it's likely not going to be handed to us. From what I hear moms say, rarely someone offers you time for exercise or here's your reduced schedule. It has to be advocated for. So we can and we should advocate for ourselves just like we do our kids and our patients so that we have what we need to be successful.
Yeah, that is an extremely, extremely important point that I really want people to think about. I think, you hit on a few different things that I really want to kind of point out. You talk about advocacy, and I think that that's such a big thing as a pharmacist, but especially as a mom and especially outside of your career and outside of, your kind of your profession. You talk about that kind of work-life balance, and I'm, sure that there are plenty of people out there who are parents, have pets, have a lot of different things going on, and just that balance that you bring and that you write about of, what is it like to really kind of balance that work with your personal life. I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and something that's, going on in pharmacy right now. You hear a lot about people just struggling with what's going on with, burnout and resiliency and all these different topics that are coming up. So I really, really want the listeners to, to take a look at that blog post, because I think that that's a very, very interesting and important perspective that you bring.
Thanks, Steve.
Brooke, in another post that you made, you talk about this concept, and I thought that this was fascinating. You term it upskill and reskill, and I thought that was so interesting. Can you explain what you talk about this friend that kind of came up with this terminology. Can you explain to the listeners, where this idea of upskill and reskill came from, and what does it really mean to you, and how do you maybe utilize that?
Yeah, sure. Another funny story. My friend, Alexandra Levitt, is an author, and she recently wrote this book called Humanity Works, which talks about how organizations can prepare for the future, incorporating technology and AI. And we were talking one day, and she drops this phrase, upskill and reskill. And I was eating like a breakfast burrito at the time, and I couldn't put it down fast enough. I was like, say that again. What did you just say? Explain that to me. So she explained it as, upskill is taking your existing level of expertise and widening it. And reskill is learning something different. And as pharmacists, as you mentioned, in this current climate, we're almost forced to upskill and reskill in order to stay competitive. And I learned this early on when applying for residencies. I just didn't have the term for it. I remember a long time ago walking into mid-year in that residency showcase, and all I saw was a sea of navy blue suits. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm wearing a navy blue suit. How am I different? How am I going to be a competitive candidate? And that's always stayed with me. And I think that's a theme across pharmacy today. Upskilling and reskilling is not only essential for our own professional opportunities, but also for personal and professional growth over time. Some of the examples we've seen, in the Pharmacist Moms group, or that some of your listeners can relate to, are, going for MTM certification, going for board certification, getting a second degree. Some moms are going back to get their residency training. So this is something that I think was underlying the pharmacy profession, but now there's a term for it. And I kind of tied it into the blog post about how it relates to growing over time.
It's really growth over time. It's growth in different areas and leadership and how do you work on yourself and expand basically is what you're getting at. Is that kind of what you're trying to put into a terminology then?
Exactly, yeah. So what we're seeing in the pharmacy profession now is that, okay, all of a sudden, big data is a big deal. Okay, so how can we explain to our graduates that not only are they going to need the clinical knowledge, they're going to need to know how to analyze big data. They're going to need a technology part of their background. They're going to need emotional intelligence. They're going to need different types of skills in the new pharmacy environment that's all ahead of us.
Yeah, and you really point out a couple of great things. I think with the evolution that's going on right now, and I try to also look outside of pharmacy just to see what are society's expectations going to be of healthcare, and what are society's expectations going to be in the future. So I really think that those are important things that we continue to expand in, and like you said, kind of utilize and embrace technology in other areas that we can really upskill and reskill ourselves. So, Brooke, I do want to move into another area here, and I've seen that you've written and worked on a variety of research projects, from contraceptive prescribing to part-time faculty policies, which I thought was really interesting, and you even talk about gender-related differences in PharmD curricula. So, out of these different projects or areas that you've done some research and writing into, what has been your most exciting or maybe your favorite project to work on, and why?
Wow, that's a tough choice. Well, my passion is women's health, so all of my work in that area is meaningful. But I would have to say that working part-time and being able to research and write and present on its success is probably the most soulful work I've done. I'm part-time in my current role in academia, which is quite rare, and I've been promoted in position and rank since going part-time, and I'm super proud of that. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I say that to let people know it's possible. It can be done. Working part-time or job share is a privilege, and not every working parent has this opportunity, and I don't think every working parent wants this type of opportunity. But for the working parents that do have this interest, what can we do to support them? And my role in that is just sharing the success that we've seen at our institution. We live in an era where women want to be a hands-on mom and have a high-level career. We want to be a room parent and be a director of pharmacy or committee chair or some other goal of ours. It's okay to level up in pharmacy and also make it to the soccer games. So what we need is flexibility. We need support and mentorship from our leaders in order to get that done. And I want to share something that my friend and colleague said to me that has stayed with me ever since I had kids. And Dee, this is what happens when you have your first child, okay? You think to yourself, there's no way I could leave this child and go back to work. You are in this haze of hormones in the first few weeks after giving birth, and you're like, I know I have worked so hard, to get where I am in my career, but I just don't think I can go back. I want to spend all my time taking pictures of their smiles and walks in the park and story time. So my friend and I were talking about how we both felt this way. And she said, looking back, that she was going to figure out a way how to stay at home and live on her spouse's salary. And she made up her mind. So she went back to work after maternity leave, determined that she was going to find a way. And she returns to work and it hits her. Oh, wait, she said, this is a part of me too. So what I took from that was that this journey now begins of navigating this space, trying to make both work, sometimes well and sometimes not so well. So how can we do better? When I first started in academia, any faculty who wanted to work part-time left to go work for industry. I didn't have any part-time faculty role models. And when I asked to go part-time in 2009, my administration took a chance on me and set some terms. And I agreed to those terms because I had this calling on my heart. And I'm proud to say that 3 other faculty members successfully transitioned to part-time after me. So I'd like to think I paved the way, but I also had a lot to prove. There's a misconception that part-timers are less engaged or produce less quality work or overall unreliable. And in our experience, we are just busting through those myths. We presented some research in this area at the last AACP meeting in July, and there were about 100 people in the audience. And many, many faculty came up to us after and said, I've been told this isn't possible for me. This isn't the culture at my institution. Oh, it would never get approved. So organizations take the risk of losing a talented high performer because a non-traditional work arrangement couldn't be created. And, one of my mentors said it best. She said most areas of pharmacy don't have the infrastructure for these types of arrangements to meet the needs of working parents. So as leaders, the best reward we can give parents after maternity leave and paternity leave is saying, I got you. I got your back. I hired you. I know your skills, your performance, your outcomes. They're all amazing. You are valuable to us and we need you. So we're going to make this work. And it may not happen overnight and it may take a while, but we want you to stay and we're going to make this work. So we could do better. So if there's any directors or leadership teams listening and would like my help in creating something at your institution, please reach out. I can draw upon our experiences and help you make it work for your fabulous working parents.
Yeah, that is extremely, extremely fascinating and important. And I pulled out a couple things there as you were telling the story about switching over to part-time, focusing on raising a family and all that. But a couple things that I do have as kind of follow-ups to that. I think what we've seen is I've seen a couple different research areas out there looking at moving more towards, that kind of 30 to 32 hour work week, giving people more time to spend with, friends, family, loved ones, doing things that they're passionate about. I've seen different studies about, remote work from home, those sorts of things. And again, we're seeing, right, like you said, there's kind of different cultures out there, and America maybe is not, we're kind of in this evolutionary phase, so maybe we're moving more towards that type of culture. But the one thing that I do want to ask you about, because I think that this is maybe curious to the folks who are listening, is, you take kind of today's environment and culture, maybe what would you say to some of the newer graduates out there who are now, facing averages of $160,000 of debt, and they're trying to maybe, or they want to raise a family, or they want to do some of these things, but are having trouble with that because it is just like, life is kind of being pushed back by this kind of insurmountable debt that you have to kind of, be able to move forward in life. So kind of, what do you kind of come across that with your students, or how do you handle those types of conversations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I would tell new graduates that are facing a lot of debt is to take advantage of the fact that the pharmacy profession is in flux right now. It's changing. You mentioned earlier, it's evolving. So there are creative positions out there. It's just a matter of finding them. Keep going. We are not limited to just hospital or just community. There are work from home positions. There are telepharmacy positions. There are positions, and we need pharmacists all hours of the day and night. So if you have a partner at home and you can work out a creative solution so that you both can work, whatever hours you need to meet those bills, to pay those bills, then find a creative solution that works for you so that you can also still be the hands-on mom that you want to be.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And to your point, I mean, that is again another area that I've kind of looked into is what other areas are there, non-traditionally where pharmacists are able to get involved. And I've seen an article recently about companies like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, who are looking for healthcare professionals to help impact some of the health service, items that they're working on. So definitely agree with you on that one, is that you do have to be somewhat selective. And again, it is in your hands of what you're able to do. So I do want to shift into one other area here, because you have touched a little bit on leadership and leadership positions, talking about your experience there. In a recent article that you wrote for Flavor RX, you were talking about how important it is to grow in the area of leadership personally. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about what you've learned about yourself as a leader, and then maybe give them some advice as to, what others out there are looking for in terms of growth as a leader?
Yeah, well, there was a time when I felt like I didn't have any female role models or female mentors. And by this, I meant who is emulating where I see myself in 10, 20, 30 years. And I realized I just have to look harder. They were there. I just had to look harder. And I could actually talk about leadership forever, but I'll try to sum it up for me. What I found in my own leadership journey is that people aren't necessarily drawn to the position. They're drawn to that person. And being connected to people is part of my own leadership philosophy. I want to follow people who have a strong sense of emotional and intellectual acuity, someone who leaves their ego at the door and listens with their whole heart and not checking their phone while you're having a conversation. So those are the types of skills that I try to project as well. I like Simon Sinek's concept of consistency versus intensity. He says that you can't go to a 2-day leadership seminar and all of a sudden be a leader. It's not the intensity of the skills or the program. It's the consistent act of becoming a better leader over time that makes a good leader. And those who don't continue to work on themselves don't tend to see any room for improvement. So my goal is just to keep at it. When I fall, pick myself back up, try again. I've never really been afraid to step outside my comfort zone. And I guess I've taken small steps continuously throughout my career. It's just how I grow. So when I mentor faculty and students now, we talk about looking at things differently, shifting perspective, trying something new, because that's worked so well for me over time.
And I really, really like that you brought up Simon Sinek, because he's honestly one of my favorite leadership-related speakers and authors out there. I love his videos, his books, his concepts. And the one thing that I do want to ask you about is, I know that you've been working on, with some students, some leaderships, and you have this concept or this vision that you term 21st century PharmD. Can you tell us a little bit about what that work is like and what your vision is for the future of that?
Sure. Yeah, this was really one of those happy accidents. At work, with a colleague, we kind of traded assignments, which, if you work in academia, you kind of understand, things happen and all of a sudden you're picking up something, and then someone else is picking up something of yours. So I had 9 academic rotation students with me this past year. So I thought to myself, how can I put my spin on an academic rotation? And we started working with this book that actually my friend wrote, Alexander Levitt, called They Don't Teach Corporate in College. And I bought the book for the students and loaned it to them for each rotation. And we talked about how to prepare for life after graduation. And I facilitated a book club with them. I invited alumni to come back and speak to them, the alumni who had great careers in various aspects of corporate life, and really exposed students to these topics. I had some topic discussions with them with some concepts in the book, and the student feedback was really positive. I wasn't really sure how this was going to go, but they felt like this was something they don't always get in the didactic curriculum, and they thought it was a great jumpstart to thinking about their corporate culture. Topics such as networking and mentorship and how to assess company culture, how to stand out. So this has ultimately led me to think about launching online content to reach more students. And my goal is to give students tools to be successful in their pharmacy careers. And I'm calling it 21st Century PharmD. And, perhaps new practitioners would be interested too. And I'm still building the website, so more to come on that. But yeah, I'm excited about this new adventure.
Yeah, just hearing you talk about the concept and the topics that you focused in on, you've got me excited. So I'm really looking forward to the
That's
content.
awesome.
And I think that, the things that you hit on within that and some of those leadership topics, and just to go off of, that book, that's a very interesting book that I wasn't aware of. And so hopefully others out there would be willing to take a look at that too. But just some of those concepts, and I call them almost like soft skills. I think everybody kind of terms them a little bit differently, but that networking, that corporate culture, how do you kind of deal with politics within organizations? I think those are things that you're 100% right. We do not teach, or you don't really come across in a didactic curriculum, but I think that those things can make a huge difference in terms of your success, in terms of your happiness, and just a workplace culture in general.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of points there. In academia, we are just so limited on time in terms of adding additional things to the curriculum. There's just no room. So unless a pharmacy student has an advisor or a mentor or a preceptor on one of their rotations who takes the time out to talk about some of these concepts in a way that students want to learn about them, I think is really important. It's bridging that gap of here's some other information you need to know to be successful, but having a 2-hour session on a Friday isn't going to be the best way to reach them. They're so used to getting their content online. So it's my goal to package it in a way that is receptive to them.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful idea. Is like you said, there's just a lot going on, and I'm sure you can appreciate everything that's going on right now in academic pharmacy. But that's one thing that I really enjoy, because I also have been offering an academic APP elective, and so kind of trying to build in some of those leadership things. I have been kind of piloting a few ideas, but I'd love to chat more maybe afterwards about some concepts that we could run.
Oh, I'd love to collaborate.
All right, Brooke. So if you had a magic wand, let's just kind of put ourselves in this wonderland here, and you could improve one thing, pick one thing. I know it's hard. There's a lot of things out there that in pharmacy or in the world that we can improve. But if you could pick one thing with the magic wand in pharmacy, what would it be, and why would you do that?
Well, I'll first talk about McDonald's, and I promise I'll circle it back to pharmacy. Just stay with me for a second. But McDonald's isn't necessarily known for really healthy food options. In fact, they're almost known for the opposite. There's been documentaries on it. So, when I go to McDonald's, when I bring my kids there, which is really rare, for all the moms out there, don't judge me, it is rare. They get a Happy Meal and I get a sad salad. Happy Meal, sad salad. I don't want a sad salad. There's a whole segment of the population that is interested in healthy eating, lower calories, lower sodium, clean eating, no antibiotics in their food. And, I want a happy salad. I want a salad that looks like it just walked out of therapy. Keep the Happy Meal, keep your Big Mac if you want. But if McDonald's flipped it on its head and said, we want to be the place, the fast food place that health-conscious people go to for their snacks, their protein shakes, and not just smaller portions of the stuff they already make, like really good food, they would be making a killing. I would go there. So relating back to pharmacy, how does this relate to pharmacy? We have over 60% of the current pharmacists in the United States are female. And of those, a large number are women of childbearing age. And of those, a large number work in the community setting, either large and small retail chains, grocery stores, things like that. But those types of environments aren't really well known for great working conditions, especially for moms. You've got someone who's 8 months pregnant, on her feet for 8 to 10 hours a day. She's not sure when she's going to eat next. She's not sure when she's going to get a bathroom break. You've got someone who just came back from maternity leave who has to pump every 3 to 4 hours, but has no place to do it. So she's on the floor in between the shelves of the pharmacy or with tech help, hopefully. But what if she's in a store all by herself? So what if pharmacy organizations like McDonald's flipped it on its head and said, we want to be known for the place to work for working moms. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, but how can we set intentional goals over time so that we can make these working conditions better for working parents? And that's going to take work, and it's going to take time, but you would, if a company decided to do that, you would attract top talent. You would become known in this space and other healthcare space as a company that supports working parents and working moms. And when you think about the consumers who walk through some of these stores, they're mostly female, of childbearing age. So would they want to spend their money in an organization for an organization that promotes and supports working moms? Yes. Yeah. So if I had a magic wand, I would say, let's flip things on their head and think, I'm a big chain. I'm a big retail chain. What can I do better to serve my working parents?
Yeah, that's an extremely interesting area that you're talking about, and I know that again this has come up more recently. I think just some of the kind of workplace conditions and that sort of thing. But I think that the part that I really liked that you talked about was making pharmacies and areas where our consumers, our patients are shopping, areas where our pharmacists are practicing, our technicians, our students, making those places that people really enjoy. And I try to look at somewhat of a big picture of a societal thing. Why are some of these companies like Amazon, like Google, like Apple, why are some of these areas outside of pharmacy, why are they being successful? Yes, they have great products, they have great services, but what we've heard and what you see and kind of read about is their workplace environments, their cultures at these companies are different, right? They're places where people love to work, or they really enjoy the culture generally at these different areas. So I think that's an extremely important point that you just made there.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
And so, Brooke, the last question that I have for you is thinking about a call to action for anyone who comes across this or is a listener or is out there and has is thinking about some of the concepts we've talked about today. What is that call of action that you propose the listeners to take in the near future?
I would say the call to action would be to ask for what you need to be successful. You're not alone. Advocate for yourself as much as you advocate for your patients. And if this is a muscle that isn't strong for you right now, start by asking questions of the teams that you serve. Ideas that come from the bottom up come in greater quantity and have a greater chance of success because of their buy-in. So, we all have teams, whether we're precepting students or whether we have technicians, we all have the ability to ask questions of those we serve, and hearing their responses will give us the motivation and the influence to then ask questions of our own leaders.
I love it. Ask for what you need. So the last thing that I'll have from you, Brooke, is I do like to have you pose one question for any of the listeners to think about. So can you think of a question that you would like to ask the listeners who are listening to the podcast?
Well, I love to meet new people and connect with new pharmacists. So the question I have for your listeners today is, what's your story? What resonated with you based on all the topics we talked about today? And I'm really sincere when I say please reach out. I would love to hear from you.
There you go. You've heard it here from Brooke. Send her some feedback. Check out the blog. Are there any other areas that listeners or followers can find you at, Brooke? I know we can share some info with them, like if you would like to share your email. I know Pharmacist Moms Group is where the blog is. Anything else that you would like anyone to know?
Yeah, well, definitely if you're a pharmacist mom, please check out the website, pharmacistmomsgroup.com. If you want to be interviewed on my blog or know of a super heroic pharmacist mom that we all need to hear from or hear about, please email me, and my email address is be.superheroic@gmail.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Mention this podcast so I know where you found me. And again, I'll be launching some online content for the 21st Century PharmD, so be on the lookout for that.
All right, Brooke, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much for the great conversation.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Brooke brings an extremely interesting and impactful perspective to what it's like to be a pharmacist, a mom, a faculty member, and a leader within the profession of pharmacy. If you haven't already, check out her blog. It's pharmacistmomgroup.com. She has a blog post on there called Superheroic. Reach out to Brooke if you'd like to contact her or write for the blog. And, feel free to add her on LinkedIn as a friend and really connect with her and see what's going on. And if you have questions or if you want to share your story, I'm sure she would love to connect with you. And if you haven't already, check out our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram account. Interact with us. Share your stories. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to have you as a guest on the podcast if you're interested. But until next time, Pharmacy Universe Nation, signing off, #Pharmacy, your host, Deeb Eid.